Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Chaos and Mayhem written by Lord Henry 7878. There is a link to the playlist in the doobly-doo. Chaos and Mayhem, Chapter 44. The final chapter. It was chaos in the meeting hall. Mayhem 2. We shot at Shill. Shill shot back at us. Shill shot at each other. I crouched under a table, looking for the Baron, other targets. While I tried not to shoot at anyone in there who wasn't technically an enemy, I really didn't like the Shilvati right now. I really think that, should a couple of them catch a stray bullet, I really wouldn't have minded. I blew out an interior agent's knee, and she flopped to the floor. Here's the thing. A 12-gauge shotgun wasn't gonna blow apart a knee, not with that flexifibber. But the force of the gunshot, though, that was what did them in. The force of the impact blew apart the bone and flesh in there. Her shattered leg held in there like a sock full of meat. I dove over a table and kicked it over. As I stood behind the makeshift cover, I tried to make the bad guys out from the party-goers. Much as I imagined most of the people here deserved whatever came to them, I figured it would be smarter to shoot at the people with guns first. The cats, it seemed, had the same idea. Gore shoved a terrified noblewoman aside as he raised a carbine he stole off a corpse. When he squeezed the trigger, the beam barely singed another noble's ear as it fried a small circle of flesh on a militiaman. I ran for it and slid between him and Sashin. Despite being a little bogged down, I had my eye on the prize. An objective of my own. We have to go for the Baron. I yelled. I doubted they could hear me above the din. What? The Baron? I yelled in his ear. As the fight wore on, I scanned the room. There were plenty of gaudily dressed Shill males, but none were the one I was looking for.
As the fight went on, the Baron knew he couldn't rely on anybody.
His militia were probably all dead, to start. Half the interior was here to arrest him, the other half were currently stuck in a five-way shootout. Once again, he had a plan. If Tetris Stamatios got out of this, he was going to reward the family who had escaped by punching out a window. Now, the hard part was getting there. The Baron was tiny, even for a Shilvati male. The Baron was old. The Baron was never a fighter, even when he was Chris Villain, rising star of the interior. What he was a manipulator. Fat bunch of good that did him right now. Instead he used his rusty old sneak-in skills. The Baron dropped to his knees and crawled behind an overturned table. He looked at the earth foods scattered on the floor. Shame about those crab rangoons. And that cheese fondue. He was partial to both of those. Ah well. No use crying over spilled milk. Possibly literally, with the fondue. Baron Stamatios simply shut out the noise and the chaos and the mayhem as he crawled beneath this table, under that dead body. OOP, some soldiers were passing by over there. He had no clue if they were his. Just in case, he laid on the floor and pretended to be dead. One part of him was struck by how strangely not afraid he was. The more rational side told that part of him to shut up. Chris Villain hadn't become the Beta's interior agent by getting scared like some male. Much later, Tetris Stamatios hadn't survived on the periphery by giving into despair every time something bad happened. He hadn't seduced the Baroness by oh fuck it. The point was he always figured a way out. And the way out presented itself, and even as the bullets and laser fire zipped over his head, the window got closer and closer. There! I yelled. I could see a tiny male sneaking out the window. Look, I was pissed, but I wasn't about to just stand up in the middle of a battle like this. I spied a different Shill male lying on the ground, sobbing a little at his wounds. What in the deep are you? He blubbered as I dragged him over. Shut up! I yelled over the din. I wrapped my arm around him and stood up, holding him out in front of me as I ran for the window. The guy screamed in terror as lasers whizzed by. Well, I say screamed, it was more sobbed in terror at being used as a human shield. Obviously this didn't sit right with any of the shill ladies there, and a bunch made a beeline to rescue this member of the weaker sex. As the first Marine bore down, I threw the guy at her as I dropped to my knees, firing up into her chin. By now, I had plenty of momentum, so as I got to my feet, I accidentally launched myself shoulder first into a nearby interior agent. This sent both of us to the floor, obviously. I, however, slid face first over a table, bringing it down on a few militia women who had taken cover underneath. Obviously I saved the whole thing by doing a Batis combat roll out of that uncontrolled free fall. Gotta look cool when you're assassinating heads of state. Unfortunately I tripped on a dead dignitary and somehow did that kind of faceplant where my feet left the ground and I sailed through the window. At least I made it. Now where was the Baron? If I were trying to escape a small war, I'd probably try to get a vehicle of some sort. Thomas. I whirled around at that familiar voice. The cats had followed. Shrek held a hand clamped hard on her bloody shoulder. How'd that happen? Tell me as we look for the Baron. How do you think? Shrek grumbled as she held a flashlight up to the fancy shill mobiles. Oh, of course. Silly me. I looked in though. I hated to call them cars, but they definitely fulfilled the same function. Let's see. There was one, nobody. I made sure to look underneath, too. Probably smart, just in case. I looked at a second car. Again, nobody. Luckily there wasn't that many cars. I must have jumped when the car a little ways away from me roared to life. Even as we all raised our guns, Gore was chuckling. Never seen a transport? He asked as we all opened fire. UV lasers and 12-gauge buckshot all struck the car repeatedly, till something sparked and blew out and the vehicle slammed to the ground. People inside must have heard it, because soldiers started running out. We had to act quick. Get one of those rides for us. I ordered as I tore open the door. Look at that, there sat the Baron, bright blue blood streaming from his broken nose and splattered all over his chest. Hi there, I said brightly as I smashed the butt of my gun into his head. I dragged him out just as Gore and the Katos showed up with a stolen car. Nice. I quickly shoved the Baron in the trunk and climbed aboard. We sped off into the night just as the shooting started. That was when we heard the thumping from the trunk. He must be awake, I observed as we heard a muffled yell for help. Oh, Gore said, trying not to laugh. I forgot Shilvati are claustrophobic. We all laughed. That's just awful. I said with a laugh, definitely not enjoying every ounce of suffering we heaped on this loser. Get some sleep, Gore ordered. We'll wake you when we deal with him. Didn't need to tell me twice, not now that the adrenaline wore off.
The sun had rose when I woke up again.
We were way out into the Pine Barrens now. I didn't see a sign that said Pine Barrens or anything, but the nearby street sign said Reesterstown Road, so that was a good giveaway. Morning sleep ahead, Sashin said. You ready? Yeah. We opened the trunk and dragged out the disheveled noble. Once we sat him down on a rock, I gave him a few slaps. Hey! Wake up! Wake up! Where am I? Baron Stamatios groaned. Doesn't matter. You're here. With us. Oh, Turox shit. The Baron got up to run for it, despite most likely knowing we'd shoot him in the back. Mr. Stamatios. I yelled after him. You're gonna die either way, so at least do it with some dignity. To my surprise, That worked. Fine. But you must know. Yes. Darach asked as she passed me my shati. I grabbed it with a quick thanks. You aren't going to get away with this, the Baron pointed out. You know how protective everybody is of men. The death of a man is a tragedy. Yeah, tell that to the thousands of men you butchered in your experiments, I growled. And you call yourself a man? What are you talking about? The Baron seemed genuinely confused. Of course I'm a male. That's the thing. Beneath his mask, I could tell Gore was grinning. You might be a male, but you ain't a man. In fact, you're probably the least manly thing in nature, a shilvati male. On top of that, you're a particularly wimpy shill male, Darach pointed out. And a murdering psychopath, I added. Light Sashin added, you're a politician. Know what we call politicians on Pesh? She made a sound like a hairball. It means you can't do things on your own, so you get others to do it for you. Not just that, I added. You took what it means to be a man and perverted it for money. Business. I raised my own gun as the cats raised theirs. I doubt a few testicles and pituitary glands are what it means to be a man. For the first time, the Baron looked scared. It's the principle of the thing, I admitted, right as I squeezed the trigger. Soon as my gun barked, the cats opened up with theirs. The Baron's body jerked this way and that as multiple shots slammed into it. Everybody fired till their guns were empty. Once we were done, the Baron resembled a pile of bloody blue meat in the grass. Thinking what I'm thinking? Sashin asked, looking at her new hubby and sister wives. We never had a wedding dinner. Gore looked at the body. Soon as he said that, he and the cats dropped to their knees and chowed down on the corpse. Oh, I turned away, nauseated. Oh God. That's just nasty. You can't leave a body. Gore pointed out through a mouthful of Baron. On Pesh you don't know where your next meal's coming from, Darach added. Besides, it's proper funeral customs. Shrek pointed out. Right, as I fought to keep the contents of my empty stomach down, I fought to remember that these were honest-to-God aliens. This was just what they did. We can't thank you enough, Thomas Sashin said, something squishy clamped in her razor-sharp teeth. You basically completed our wedding for us. Gore snapped off a rib and sucked out the goo inside. Best wedding contract ever. Wedding contract, huh? Who's getting married? Think I can ask you for one more favor? We are. Gore said happily, nuzzling one of the other cats. What do you need, friend of the Poison Rain clan? Sashin sucked down the piece of insides and stood up. I have a cousin, I said. The Baron killed his whole family. Can you help me find him? I'm all he has left.
Epilogue 1.
The death of the Baron is a tragedy, the first businesswoman said. But not one we cannot recover from. Like all the business folk in this little group chat, she kept her face blacked out. We received the research and backed it up to the proper servers, the second businessman said. Despite his face being blacked out, it was easy to tell he was from the consortium. His horns marked him as Nicrew. The project will continue unhindered. Excellent, the one in charge said. Even blacked out like this, it was easy to tell she was sipping something. Long live the Union! Long live the Union, came the stated response from the members of this council, as each one of their screens slowly blinked out of existence. Smiling softly to herself, she sipped her drink as she pondered exactly how to deal with the ever-growing problems on her plate. As with most things, the simplest option was often the best: accelerate their operations, and push the tepid empires ever closer to their goal.
Epilogue 2.
The last couple of years had been a blur. Watching Jason grow up had been great, even with the occasional visit from the interior. Rumor had it that once Governess Cosmonos found out exactly what the previous Baron had done, she started handing out mass pardons to the former rebels. I had yet to see mine, of course. I suspect she had a bone to pick with me. It sucked because I couldn't actually do normal work without it. Instead I fell on Mom's old standby, illegal shit. Ah well. I turned on the news. Oh look, the Empress was saying something about us. Well, not us, but the events in Maryland. People of Earth, the elderly, but solidly built woman stated from a podium with an imperious air. I am proud to be the Empress to welcome you into our glorious empire. Your will, your unshakable courage and resolve, even against my own forces, has softened my heart. A wise young human once told me that it is not weakness to recognize one's own faults and work diligently to repair what has been damaged. A large figure in purple armor sat off to the side with a woman that looked like a much younger and more lithe version of the Empress, the iridescent plates that made up the external portion of the armor dimly reflecting the sunlight of the open-air stage. Purity control was a severe blight upon my empire, perpetuated by members of my nobility and government who had foregone their oaths, their beliefs, and any semblance of nobility that remained in their blackened hearts, and I am here to denounce their actions personally. Her tone was no longer full of vigor, instead a somber mask had replaced the steel of her earlier tone. I have come to reassure my people, my citizens, that not only is this heinous operation disavowed at every level of my loyal government, but I have my personal forces actively cutting the rot from my beautiful empire. That's new, I thought as I watched the Empress for the first time on Earth coming to apologize. Apologize for the invasion and deaths of millions. Then we'll talk. Ready for school, bud? I asked. Jason was smart as fuck. He'd managed to learn to cook and insisted on making his own breakfast. I didn't dare let him touch the stove without my supervision, but damn, that kid could cook. He even figured out Mom's old brisket recipe. Yeah. Wash your hands first. You can't go to school with your hands smelling like whatever that is. I took a theatrical sniff. Once he was done, I shooed him out the door. Have a good one, kid. And remember what we talked about. I don't want to get another call from your teacher complaining about you singing about how we should lynch the landlord. A few weeks ago Jason had gotten into my YouTube music playlists. I'd been pretty proud when I came home to the Dead Kennedys playing. Not so proud when the teacher called, claiming he'd been singing Let's Lynch the Landlord in class. Funny as that incident had been, Jason needed to understand that the shill didn't get that disrespect for authority was a healthy human trait. Oh well. Once the bus disappeared, I threw my bag in the car. I had an actual landlord to lynch. Apparently some nobles had been buying up property all over Maryland and charging through the roof for terrible apartments. Even my rent for this shitty apartment had gone off the rails. Some days I worried we'd be thrown out. Adulthood, y'all. Anyways, once I got there, I parked the car and pulled out a metal bat, some zip ties, and a mask. Oh, can't he? I yelled as I kicked open the door. I wasn't prepared for two other guys in some serious tactical get-ups to be standing over the badly beaten Shilvati male. I could hear the record scratch. Who the hell are you? The shorter of the two, wearing a green-skulled gas mask, asked, leveling a short rifle at me as the other picked up "Can't he" like he weighed nothing, just to set him back on a chair groaning. "Ease up," chuckled the mountain of a man with a blood-red skull on his mask as he placed a large hand on the other fighter's shoulder. "We met him once upon a time, about 6 or 7 years back. Baltimore, Bill's protege, ring a bell, killer." "Bill," asked the other, as in CIA spook, "make an army disappear, Bill?" "Yeah," said the tall man, pulling his gas mask over his head, "that Bill." "Sounds about right," I admitted. though I privately wondered which make an army disappear he was referring to. That happened a lot. He was an old friend from the army days, the tall, blonde-haired man responded, a smile touching the corner of his mouth. He used our squad for a few ops in Karengal and Kabul. Taught us a lot. I'm gonna miss the grouchy fuck, chuckled the green gas mask before he too pulled his off. He had hard, icy blue eyes and dark brown hair that stuck out in all directions, combined with a 5 o'clock shadow. Yeah, I replied, looking between the two soldiers, and the belt-fed short machine gun the tall one had strapped to his plate carrier. Me too. Anyway, sighed the large one, taking a step towards me. I think we got all we could from this shitbag. If it helps, he was part of the acquisition team for purity control. Used to raise the rent on tenants to force them to go do a job and then make them disappear. Do with that info what you will, kid. He slapped me once on the shoulder before whispering, Brennan's pub, downtown Westminster, tonight, 9 o'clock. Be there. Right, okay. I mulled that over as I went through the rest of my day. I sold some mint to shill Marines, threw a few rocks through windows, so on, so forth. After I got Jason to bed for the night, I got a neighbor to watch for a few hours and went out again. Brennan's, downtown. I knew the place. Anyways, I got there and turned off the radio. Even though it was night, I slipped on my shades and walked up, hands in pockets. After taking a few breaths I went inside. Okay, that's different. I saw a few Shilvati chilling in the corner. Instinctively, my hand tightened on the switchblade in my pocket. Mine didn't loosen at all when I saw, let's see. The bartender was a horned alien I didn't recognize. 4 Kasrin chatted and fought in the corner. These shill were off duty. I had to physically remind myself that as I unclenched my hand and walked to the bar. Guinness, I said, looking around for the guys from earlier. Oh, she responded in an Australian accent. A man of quality. I've got you. Thanks, I replied, looking into her monochrome silver eyes as she shot an award-winning smile my way before I sat down in a bar stool. Shortly after, a pint of Guinness was set on a coaster in front of me, and I happily began to sip the rich, almost chocolatey flavour. The door jingled as the 2 men from earlier strode into the bar, wearing shorts and t-shirts, looking around for a brief moment before the smaller of the 2 slapped the tall one on his arm with his unoccupied hand and pointed at me. They sat down on either side of me, with the small one setting a green canvas bag on the counter. Whiskey sour, said the short one to the bartender, whatever's cheap. Vodka, neat, said the tall one with a broad grin, making clear bedroom eyes at the bartender. Yeah, she was kinda cute, but the glowing tattoo that wrapped around her torso was a little unnerving. Top shelf, preferably. Coming right up, darling, she responded with a bright, wide grin. Adam, said the tall one offhandedly, turning to face me and extending his hand. His handshake felt like gripping a solid piece of rebar, the muscles underneath like suspension cables. Alex, said the other, whose hand was thankfully a lot less rip your spine out. Tom, I replied, looking between the 2. You guys want to tell me why I'm here? As my grandmother-in-law loves to say, chuckled Adam, gotta play the game. Speaking of which, Alec. What you got there? Oh yeah, replied Alec with a mischievous grin as I turned to face him. Your uncle forgot some shit in my truck after an op went sideways in Baltimore. Most of it had to be ditched, but I snagged this. Felt sentimental. With that, he slid the bag in my direction, the print on the front faded slightly, reading U.S. mask, protective, field M1701. I've already got a gas mask back at the apartment, I replied, placing a hand gingerly on the rough, green fabric. Admittedly, mine was a cheap as fuck niche something or other from the Home Depot. Open it, chuckled Adam as the bartender came back with their drinks, placing a glass of ice-cold vodka in front of him with a piece of paper under it. Adam scrunched his brow, picking up and unfolding the piece of paper as he looked at the Omnipad contact info written on it. He shot the bartender a fed-up expression as she winked at him with a salacious grin, batting her lashes a couple of times as she sashayed away. He inhaled deeply before sighing and rolling his eyes with a smirk. Do they know each other? I thought as I looked around the bar, noticing each of the groups shooting passing glances our way, heavily favoring the two men sitting on my sides. Okay, something's fishy, I thought, looking back to the canvas bag in front of me. I know I'm not a male model, but there should at least be a few of the shill looking flirtatiously my way if past experiences were any evidence. I unclipped the buttons on the top of the bag, and pulled out a standard, folded gas mask in the bag, and turned it over to see its face. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the battle-worn white skull emblazoned on the front. I saw him wear it once, in the early days. The long, vampiric fangs that extended from the canines came down over where the jaw should be, giving the impression of a massive, gaping maw. I trailed off, attempting to find words. Uncle Bill had talked about how this had served him well since Desert Storm offhandedly once or twice, but I now realized the connection. The men on either side of me each had a similar skull on their mask, if colored and tailored slightly differently. Thank you. But, I'm guessing you didn't just want to give me a family heirloom. On the money, Tom replied Alec before slurping his drink, I knew you were smart. Simple mode is that we're hunting some big fucking game. Purity control was a small piece of a much bigger, much more fucking ugly beast. We'd like your help, but first, you gotta sign this. Just part of the mission parameters. Adam placed an Omnipad in front of me, the first words on the digital page causing me to suck in a breath of air. Imperial writ of secrecy, authorized by Empress Callista, Princess Camilish, and Princess Yendara. Holy fucking shit! I thought, thinking about the implications of the official-looking document, while in a bar, surrounded by 3 military-aged shill women, and 2 men working for the royal family. What I didn't understand was the rowdy Pisrin in the back, and the tattooed woman running the bar. Bar Arab whined the bartender, now laying dramatically, can we tell him yet? Sil groaned Adam lovingly. Wait, I said, looking between the two, you know each other. Sign the document, and we can tell you more. It's not binding for anything other than secrecy. You're free to leave at any time. With a sigh, I signed my name, realizing that I'd just have to trust the man, and slid the pad back. I can't leave Earth. I sighed, looking between the two. I've got a 10-year-old, and I'm not gonna abandon him for another war. Dear heart, came a woman's voice from the table behind us, I've got this one. I turned to find a tall, lithe Shilvati woman stepping out of the booth. She strode over to us before pausing with her hands clasped in front of her waist. Tom, Yendara. Yendara, Tom? Said Adam, waving his hand between us. No, I thought, remembering the name on the document. I do believe my grandmother and aunt would just adore having another child around the palace. I can offer full-time security with a pod of male glaives from the prince's personal guard. He will be as safe as any member of the royal family, and I promise he will be treated as such. Okay. I said, now looking around the room to find the Pisrin strolling over to our bar, seating themselves next to Alec. But what's the mission? Like Alec said, stated Adam with a smile, picking up the gas mask from the bar, and extending it out to me, we are hunting big game, the worst the galaxy has to offer. Purity control was just the start, we are going after the fuckers running the show. Lots of denied operations, black budgets, and plenty of targets. You in? I reached out, and took Uncle Bill's mask from his hand. When do I start? End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode, and do all the other YouTube stuff. Visit and support the author. All the relevant links are in the doobly-doo, and comment your opinions, good or bad. And I'll see you next time. And as usual, have a wonderful day. Oh, and we're going back to Going Native by Uncle Sealing tomorrow.